Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1475B, and today's date is January 18th, 2018, and the title of the episode is Deciphering Fiction from Reality Will Push We the People to Take Charge. Let's get into the economic collapse, political, and geopolitical news. Now, Trump said he was going to announce this fake news awards, and he actually did. He came out with the top 11 or so of the corporate media news stories that are completely fake. Number one, he started with the New York Times. Paul Krugman claimed on the day of President Trump's historic landslide victory that the economy would never recover. Well, it looks like the economy really didn't recover, but it didn't fail either. Number two, ABC's News' Brian Ross chokes and sends markets in a downward spiral with a false report. Number three, CNN falsely reported that the candidate Donald Trump and his son Donald J. Trump Jr. had access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks. Number four, Time falsely reported that the President Trump removed a bust of Martin Luther King Jr. from the Oval Office, which we know that really did not happen. Number five, Washington Post falsely reported that the president's massive sold-out rally in Pensacola, Florida was empty. Of course, that wasn't true whatsoever. They took the pictures before the people actually really got there, or just a couple of people were there, and they snapped the pictures and they used that. Just like when he was being inaugurated, they said that there was really nobody there, compared it to Obama's crowd. And of course, the pictures weren't taken at the same exact time. And of course, they lied about that. CNN falsely edited a video to make it appear Trump defiantly overfed fish during a visit with the Japanese Prime Minister. Now, the Japanese Prime Minister actually led the way with the feeding and dumped the whole thing in. Then Trump followed, but they left that little part out. CNN falsely reported about Anthony Scaramucci's meeting with a Russian, but retracted it due to a significant breakdown in the process, which means they knew it was they were found out and it was completely fake. We see CNN falsely reported that the former FBI Director James Comey would dispute President Trump's claim that he was told he was not under investigation. Well, we know that was false, and we also know that Comey leaked classified memos to his friend, which then gave it to the Times, New York Times, which was completely illegal, and we see the whole thing falling apart. We also see, at last but not least, Russian collusion. Russian collusion is perhaps the greatest hoax perpetrated on the American people. There was no collusion whatsoever. Now, what's very interesting is that the New York City police raided Newsweek magazine and its parent IBT Media. And the outline reports the reason for the visit was not clear, but one employee said police were taking photos of the company's servers, which is very interesting. Now, it gets even more interesting than this, because police also visited the office in December. And this is coming from a former employee. And they were told that it was because a white substance had been mailed to Executive News Director Ken Lee, which they were then told turned out to be a false alarm. Now, this looks like this is a function of the police where they're gathering evidence, then logging it, taking pictures of the racks, the servers, which I don't know why you would take a picture of the server, because you want what's inside the server, but they also took pictures of the serial number stickers and asset tags. So the big question here is, what are they looking for? Why are they gathering evidence? Does this have to do with Clinton? Because they did have a new article coming out saying that Clinton can still be president. Is there something that's on the servers that was dumped on there and they need to get that off because it's damaging evidence to maybe someone in government, the deep state? We don't know as of yet. And it's very interesting that the FBI was not involved, but it was the New York City police. But we'll have to watch this and see where this goes. Now, U.S. Secretary of Education Betsy Devos announced the death of Common Core. Now, she said, listen, the federal government tried to improve education. She said, we saw two presidents from different political parties and philosophies take two different approaches. Federally mandated assessments, federal money, federal standards, all originated in Washington, and none solved the problem. Too many of America's students are still unprepared. First, we had no child left behind. The general consensus among federal policymakers was that greater accountability would lead to better schools. Highlighting America's education woes had become an American pastime, and they thought surely if schools were forced to answer for their failures, students would ultimately be better off. Turns out, it didn't. It didn't work at all. Then we had Obama. The Obama administration dangled billions of dollars through the race to the top competition. And in the grant-making process, not so subtly encouraged states to adopt the Common Core state standards with a price tag of nearly $4.5 billion. It was billed as the largest ever federal investment in school reform. Now, when it first came out, they said, yes, this is what we need. We need an educational system, and it's all Common Core. It sounds fantastic, but it was never tested. It was never critique created by teachers, and they spent hundreds of millions of dollars in doing this. Now, years later, we've had tests to see how our children have been doing. And despite the change, despite this Common Core where everyone's going to learn, which we talked about in great length in many, many reports ago about how this is not going to help society, it's going to actually dumb down America, and this is exactly what we're seeing. Basically, reading and science, they didn't improve at all. Actually, the math scores dropped dramatically. It didn't work. Actually, the founding fathers, they talked about education. And they said the best education is to have the local communities, the parents, decide what's best for their children. And guess what? Who's going to want the best for their children but a mother and a father? The community as a whole. And they wanted it at this low level. They didn't want the government to decide what type of education we were going to get. Actually, ever since the Department of Education was put into place, our education has been declining ever since. Think about that for a second. If we left it up to the communities to decide how to teach, what to teach, and what was good for our children, we would be incredibly well today. But of course, those in government, the deep state and the cabal, they didn't want this. They wanted a dumbed down America because they knew exactly what they were going to do in the end. It's called a one world government where all the people are dumbed down and you just do what they say. You can't think. You can't make decisions. All you can do is work. Work, 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 work. That's all they wanted. And we can see now looking back, actually we told you, we said this was going to happen. Now looking back, we can see this is exactly what they were trying to do. Remember, they were trying to push the TPP. They were going to place court systems that were above the governments, which would tell the governments what to do. That is a one world government. And the whole thing is falling apart. We see the entire meeting up in Vancouver is a complete farce because North Korea and South Korea, they're talking to each other. They're trying to get together, talk to each other, and go in the right direction. And if the United States and the coalition forces and all these other countries stay out of their business, guess what? They can decide on how to proceed to the next level of discussions. But again, the cabal, the deep state, they don't want this. This is why they didn't invite Russia and China into the talks in Vancouver. Because they don't want a solution. They want war. Now, Trump made this very interesting statement. He says Russia is not helping us at all with North Korea. And of course, the corporate media is out there saying that, Russia is bypassing the sanctions, helping North Korea, and it sounds really bad, but you really need to understand what Trump actually really does when he says these things. There's little tidbits of things in there because he's a very smart businessman. He knows how to make deals, and he knows how to maneuver these idiots in the corporate media and government. Remember, these politicians, they're just politicians. They really have no background in much of anything. Maybe there's a few, but most of them, they really don't know much. They're really in there for themselves, and that's all they think about. So let's listen to what he said and why he said it. Now, Trump is blaming Russia for failing to ratchet up economic pressure on North Korea. He said Russia is not helping us at all with North Korea. Trump also complained that Russia was filling in the economic gaps caused by any efforts by China to pressure North Korea, basically bypassing all these sanctions. He said what China is helping us with, Russia is denting. In other words, Russia is making up for some of what China is doing. Now, this is the part where he's going to move the corporate media, the people in government, to the way he thinks. And he's going to trick them. Most of them won't even see it coming. He admitted that the United States did not have a good relationship with Russia, thanks to the ongoing hysteria. Now, of course, the cabal, the deep state, they don't want a relationship with Russia. They want to get into war with Russia. He went on to say that he can do a lot. He's talking about Putin. But unfortunately, we don't have much of a relationship with Russia. And in some cases, it's probable that what China takes back, Russia gives. So the net result is not as good as it could be. Think about what he just did here. Listen, Russia is helping North Korea bypass all these sanctions, everything that we're trying to do to put the squeeze on North Korea. If we had better relations with Russia, we can work together to put a lot of pressure on North Korea. Now, think about what he's doing here. He's setting it up so we can have a relationship with Russia. So China and Russia can work together and then eventually move towards their deal. Now, think about this. They talked about, this double freeze where North Korea was going to freeze their nuclear program, the missile program, and the United States would freeze the drills. And of course, the corporate media and the rest were out there saying, no, we will not go along with this deal. And then Tillerson put out feelers to see, how people would react if we did have some type of peace process. And then we had the Olympics come up. And South Korea asked for the United States to hold off on the drills. And the United States, Trump said, yes, we're not going to do drills. Which is a freeze, a part of a freeze of goodwill towards North Korea, because North Korea said, we're opening up the hotline, we're going to speak to South Korea. And then the United States gave a little bit to North Korea. This was the beginning of all of this. Now, of course, the corporate media is trying to play this up that, Russia this, Russia that, North Korea, but the whole thing is being done behind the scenes. Remember, the corporate media, the cabal, is great with misinformation. And this is what they've been using for a very long time. Now, if misinformation doesn't work and the cabal, the deep state, can't get what they want, they try to push their agenda in different ways, false flags, or trying different tactics to get the other country to react. Now, one of those tactics was having drones attack a Russian base in Syria. And this was a multiple drone attack, and we discussed this before, but Russia was able to pretty much destroy the drones and actually take control electronically and land the drones. Now, they've been looking at these drones, and what they've been saying is that it really looks like this is the CIA. They said sophisticated technology and a Ukrainian connection indicate that the swarm attack with 13 unmanned aerial vehicles was not the work solely of a Syrian anti-government militant group. Those captured intact UAVs provide information, forensic information, about who authored the plot. Now, they released some images of the UAVs, and these are rudimentary construction, looks like plywood and things like that, but the navigation technology and explosives on board were sophisticated and professionally made. This was no amateurish mission. The drones were unlikely to have been made by Syrian militants. When they looked at it, they see that the explosives were PETN substances, and it indicates that is from Ukraine. This is the preliminary research shows that the PETN was used as a base for an explosive substance used in the ammo, which is more powerful than hexogen. The specified explosive is produced in a number of countries. Ukraine is one of those places. And that points to the Americans as the bridging agency between Ukraine and Syria. Another key factor is that at the time of the attacks, the Russians detected a U.S. Poseidon surveillance aircraft, which was flying very close to where the drones were. And they would have the ability to guide the drones to the precise location of the Russian bases. Now, normally the U.S. Navy fleet has these planes. They're commonly thought as a U.S. Navy fleet plane. But the CIA, they have their own Poseidon aircraft. And we know the CIA, they would use it on a Russian base. Now, the question is, what were they trying to do? The objective was trying to get Turkey involved in this. They were trying to make it look like it came from Turkey, to try to sever the relationship between Turkey and Russia, and trying to push their agenda on Russia. Now, the other thing that we need to look at is they might have used these drones to test to see how the Russian air defenses actually work, what signals they send out, how they perform. It might have been a test to see what they can do later on. Now, we see out in Syria, there's been reports that this new Kurdish 30,000 force, this border guard force, is heading towards the border. Turkey's out there screaming and yelling, saying that they will attack unless the U.S. withdraws support for the Kurdish force. And the Syrians are saying, listen, if Turkey invades, we will destroy their planes, their troops, their tanks. We will attack. And the Syrian air defense is ready to go. So it looks like what the cabal wants with this information that they're putting out in the corporate media, then it was picked up. They want something to happen here. Now, what's very interesting is that Tillerson and Trump, they're going back and forth with good cop, bad cop, and they're keeping the cabal, the deep state, completely confused in what's really going on here. Now, something very important Tillerson said, that he denied that the United States had any intention to build a Syria-Turkey border force, saying the issue, which got Turkey all riled up, has been misportrayed, misrepresented, misinformation. Think about that for a second. Misinformation. Now, Tillerson was out there saying that the U.S. troops will remain in Syria to stop the resurrection of the Islamic State. Now, the corporate media was out there saying that it's an open-ended policy. We're never leaving Syria. No, that's not what's happening here. What he's saying is that the U.S. is going to be in Syria right now to make sure the cabal does not have the ability to resurrect the Islamic State. And he's saying that if the U.S. did withdraw from Syria, it would help Assad and give Iran an opportunity to strengthen its role in the region. Now let's think about this for a second. Iran is already in the region. Assad already has the upper hand. I mean, The United States staying in Syria doesn't stop Assad from running the country. Doesn't stop Assad from anything, actually, if the Islamic State no longer exists, if Al-Qaeda no longer exists. Why would the U.S. stay in Syria for a little bit longer? To stop the cabal, to keep Assad in power by keeping the rebels. Remember, they're not funded anymore, the moderate rebels. The Islamic State, they're out of the picture, pretty much. Al-Qaeda, pretty much out of the picture. If the U.S. stays in there and it's not part of the cabal where they're actually fighting against the Islamic State, it holds the country intact right now. Now, I'm not saying this is a situation where the U.S. is going to stay forever. I think they've worked out a deal with Russia, with Syria, to stay in there until the cabal is completely gone. Once the cabal is completely gone, the United States will leave. They actually sent some of the soldiers out of the U.S. right now. Tillerson also explained that the U.S. needs Russia's cooperation in order to strengthen the de-escalation area in the southwestern Syria area. So we see already that what the corporate media is putting out and what's really happening are two separate and different things, because the cabal is being hammered from all different directions right now. We see the CDC, they were going to have these nuke talks on January 16th. They canceled it, and they didn't cancel it because of what happened in Hawaii. They actually canceled it before that happened, but they're saying that they canceled it because they have a more pressing issue, and that is the flu epidemic in the United States. And that was the reason they gave. Now, I just wanted to go over a little bit of different points of Q and parts of his messages that he's putting out there. And some of them that I picked out, and I'm going to be doing this throughout each report to see what has been happening in real time is actually happening with what this person is saying or a group of people are saying. If this was really an insider or not an insider, not too sure yet. But some of the things that he or she or a group of people wrote are the following. Raw intel vital. Raw intel, that is the intel from Trump, Tillerson themselves, not from the corporate media. The raw intel coming from the Pentagon that is working with Trump. U.S. military is vital in all these different areas fighting the cabal, the paid mercenary army. Do not chase misinfo. Actually, Tillerson even said misportrayed, misrepresented it. Actually, it's a misportrayed definition, misrepresented, also misinformation. Do not chase misinfo, which says the cabal is going to be putting out a lot of misinformation to lead people in the wrong direction here, to make people think that something else is happening while what's really happening is not what they want. Major players here to distract, create doubt, and alter the direction. So let's think about all of this. This is what we've been seeing. And we can see that the cabal, the deep state, they're going to continually do this. They're going to put out misinformation. They're going to make us think things are happening when they're really not. And if we look at what's really happening, I'm talking about the actions. I'm talking about what is really happening out in these countries, where everything is not what it seems. The cabal is pretty much finished in Syria. They're fighting just to stay in these Middle Eastern countries because that is what holds up their entire system. Once that falls, the petrodollar falls. Once the petrodollar falls, they have no funding. Once the poppy fields in Afghanistan are dismantled and the Islamic State is completely eradicated from Afghanistan, and once the people take over Afghanistan, actually when the Taliban actually was running Afghanistan, there were very few poppy fields, hardly any. When the U.S. came in there, that's when the poppy fields all popped up because that was the CIA creating these poppy fields to sell opium all over the world to pay for their covert operations. If you cut off the funding in all these different areas, which is happening right now, you cut off the cabal, the intelligence agencies. And this is what they're doing right now. That's the reality. And if more people see the reality and hear the reality compared to fiction, we the people can start to take charge, can start to take the country back. And that is what this is all about. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.